The book is called Because Internet. So it talks about the creation of these different forms of languages in like different like sub communities of the internet on different platforms, whether that's like Reddit or Twitter or 4chan or TikTok now. So she was a bit pre TikTok.
While you're on this, one more second, I had a fascinating discussion the other day. I've been arguing that generative AI might expand literacy. That is to say, people who are intimidated by writing. One could say that Montaigne raised the bar for entry into public discourse. You had to be a writer. You had to write well. I've speculated that generative AI could be used to help people who are intimidated by writing to tell their own stories, to say what they want to say, to frankly code switch to standard language. And a couple of my students in our executive program at the journalism school said, hold on, you're then trying to set language back to the least common denominator of what it was from those who had the power to publish. That's what generative AI spits out. And so I hope that we embrace a grand diversity of language that will be coming on the internet.
I think what we're seeing on the internet is maybe like an expression of language in a way that we have always had anyway. It's just that in a lot of senses, the way that people talked for a long time was not necessarily reflective of the way that they wrote, especially in like terms of like slang and things like that. There's one of the best examples is a bit obscure, but so I used to work in Austria, and I learned, instead of learning German, I learned their like variation, the dialect variation of German where I was working. And they texted in the dialect, right? So it wasn't German, but it was like phonetically worked out in the same way that German is. So I would look at it and be like, what on earth does that mean? And then if you read it, like just sound it out, then you can work out, it's like, oh, that's that sound in the dialect and that's that word there for because of it. Do you think that the internet is like just simply like giving expression to these things, or do you think there's actually like a new language being built in these communities?
You're going down such great, wonderful rabbit holes here. I love this. Let me go back, start back again. One thing I learned that for movable type, one necessity was to reinsert the space into writing. That from about, I don't know, 200 to 700 AD, the space disappeared. And that seems so illogical. If you look at old scribal manuscripts, they are impossible for our modern eyes. It's just this, the letters themselves are weird and they're all mashed together. And that makes no sense until, I think it's Paul Sanger wrote a book about the space, who said that if you're a child learning to write at the beginning, you don't put spaces in because to you it's all a continuous sound. If you hear a foreign language, especially Schweizerdeutsch or something like that, it's unintelligible. So it's just one sound, right? But by reinserting the words, it was scribes in Ireland in about 1700 something, 700 something, that started putting the space back in. Then words became distinct, and then we started to see the beginnings of grammar, sentences and grammar and punctuation and a different sense of things. Even the shape of the word was important. We don't read by parsing every letter. We read by looking quickly at the shape of the word and understanding that. It's called the boom of space. So I think you're very right that when we go to today, if you look at how young people use text, and elders sometimes roll their eyes at this, oh my God, what's going to happen to the language? No, there's a tremendous inventiveness that's going on around language. If you look at what happens in China and the need to get around the censors, there's an inventiveness around language. Language is ours. Language is everybody's. And I think it's really exciting. I was an old copy editor, so I used to be a stickler with a pencil up my ass, worried about semicolons and that versus which and if versus whether. And I spent a lot of time learning all that, and it's hard to give it up. It's hard to give up that orthodoxy, but that orthodoxy is kind of an expression of power. So I don't know where the language will go, and language will become, I think, variant again with many more dialects than we had before.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing which way it goes, because everyone sort of imagines there'll be a natural trend towards like a universal global language, and we'll lose so quite a lot. Well, I mean, we have lost a lot of languages as sort of cultures get wiped out, and I think the assumption is that a lot of like specialized, like localized dialects might sort of die out essentially. But maybe the internet will see the rebirth of new and different ones.
Yeah, and also if we can train AI, one of its useful tasks might be to learn some of these more obscure languages.
That is a wow. I hadn't even thought of that. That's a whole nother idea. Wow. Okay.
I mean, you can really go crazy and wonder whether, because AI can find these patterns, it doesn't understand anything. Um, it has no sense of words, no sense of meaning, no sense of truth or fact, but it does find these patterns and decodes them as a result. So I'd love to fantasize. What if you could take whale sounds and put it in AI? Would you start to understand the language?
Ooh, maybe
That's getting a little woo there,
a
but
little bit woo. Yeah. Um, this one of the ideas you have in the book is this idea of the fact that once we had words arranged in a sentence in a line, that the human thought process became linear. It was a sentence. It was start to finish. That knowledge itself was like bound within the book, and it had a start and a beginning and a pathway through. And I thought a lot about this in probably a very linear way. Um, how do you imagine the train, like a train of thought, went prior to that? Do you think it had a really genuine impact on the way people thought problems through, or like impacted their like day to day like critical thinking skills, or like how do you think that was different?
another great question. Credit where it's due is Marshall McLuhan, who said that come print, we cognize the world. We thought of the world. Our organizing principle for the world, and this sentence as an example, became linear, and we valued the story. And we came to this idea, this notion of content which fills a thing, a book with a beginning and end. And inside that are stories with a beginning and a definable end, and sentences with a beginning and end. Well, the world isn't that way. We don't always speak with periods. The internet may be a more accurate presentation of the world in that it has no beginning and no end. It scrolls through forever, and it links off in all kinds of unexpected ways. And so if we believe the Gutenberg parenthesis and we are returning to a reality before print, then we might be seeing that in the internet. How people thought before, no way to know. Um, um, I was fascinated by things like the vogue in letter writing that came as people became more literate. And there was an orthodoxy to how to write letters, but that wasn't how people spoke. That certainly then wasn't how they thought. I do think it must have been different. I've been doing research for a coming book on the internet, and I came across this idea of fama. I was trying to think of myself, how did people deal with truth and authority before there was print and editors and publishers and librarians and so on? Well, there's this idea of fama, F-A-M-A, which means in Latin, it is said. I don't have a classical education, so I take someone's word for that. And what it means is it was a social structure for understanding authority. Who spoke it? How are they full of crap all the time, or are they generally reliable? It attaches to their reputation, to the reputation of the story, to the reputation of the subject and the spreader. And that's how people figured out it was true. When print came out, print had no authority. It had no provenance. Anybody could make this pamphlet. Anybody can make a Facebook post. Same thing, right? It only got authority imbued in it when we had the institutions of editing and publishing that came along. Those are institutions that are not adequate to the scale of speech today, and that we haven't reinvented yet. So I've got to guess, to your question, that going back before print, things were much more if this, then that, conversational, maybe a little bit of this, could be that, more conditional, I guess. This could be true, but we don't know. That guy got it wrong last time. We'll see what's what. And I think that's, again, a truer view of the world than the idea that a newspaper can deliver you the truth, or the fact that it's printed in the book means it's reliable.